The Velthari Dominion had ruled the Orion arm of the galaxy for 12,000 years. Their empire covered 900 worlds, and their warships numbered in the millions. Every species in the galaxy knew their name and feared it. The Velthari were tall, scaled creatures with 4 arms and eyes that glowed like burning coals. They believed they were the supreme race, and for thousands of years, nobody had proven them wrong. Commander Zethral stood on the bridge of his patrol cruiser, watching the stars drift past the viewscreen. He had served the Dominion for 200 years, and in all that time, he had never met a species that could challenge Velthari power. Some tried to fight. They were crushed. Some tried to run. They were hunted down. Most simply surrendered the moment they saw Velthari warships. Those were the smart ones. His sensor officer made a clicking sound that indicated confusion. "Commander, we have detected an unknown vessel near the Kepler boundary. It does not match any design in our database." Zethral turned his massive head toward the display. The ship was small, barely larger than a Velthari shuttle. Its design was crude, with visible seams in the hull and primitive engine pods that leaked radiation. Whoever had built this vessel clearly did not understand proper starship construction. "Hail them," Zethral ordered. "Find out what species we are dealing with." The communication channel crackled to life, and Zethral found himself looking at one of the strangest creatures he had ever seen. It was soft and pale, with only 2 arms and 2 small eyes. Hair grew from the top of its head like some kind of decorative growth. The creature wore a uniform of blue and gray with a small symbol on its chest. "This is Captain Daniel Porter of the Earth vessel Endeavor," the creature said. "We are on a peaceful scientific mission. We mean no harm to anyone." Zethral felt his scales ripple with amusement. Earth, he had never heard of such a world. These creatures called themselves humans, according to the translator. They were clearly primitive, barely capable of traveling between stars. They were no threat to anyone, but they had entered space that bordered Velthari territory, and that could not be tolerated. "You will surrender your vessel immediately," Zethral commanded. "Your crew will be taken for questioning. Your ship will be seized. Resist, and you will be destroyed." Captain Daniel Porter's face showed an expression that Zethral's translator identified as concern. "Commander, I need to contact my government before I can agree to anything like that. Please, give us time to communicate with Earth. I'm sure we can resolve this peacefully." Time. The human wanted time. In Velthari culture, hesitation was the mark of weakness. A true warrior made decisions instantly. A true leader never asked for permission. This human was clearly a coward, unfit to command even such a pathetic vessel. "You have no time," Zethral replied. "Surrender now, or face the consequences." On the Endeavor, Captain Porter turned to his crew. They had been in space for 8 months, studying distant stars and collecting data that would help humanity understand the universe. They were scientists, not soldiers. Their ship carried no weapons beyond a small laser meant for clearing space debris. Communications. Officer Lisa Grant was working frantically at her console. "Captain, I'm trying to establish a quantum link to Earth Command. If I can just get a signal through." Chief Science Officer Kevin Walsh stood near the sensor station, his face pale. "Sir, they're powering weapons. Multiple targeting locks on our hull. Navigator Amy Torres had already calculated their options. There's nowhere to run, Captain. Their ships are faster than us. Even if we went to maximum thrust, they'd catch us in minutes." Captain Porter looked at his crew. 43 people who had trusted him to lead them safely through the stars. 43 people who had families waiting for them back on Earth. He thought of his wife, Margaret, and his 2 children. He had promised them he would come home. "Lisa," he said quietly, "whatever happens, make sure Earth knows. Send everything. All our sensor logs, all our recordings, everything." Lisa nodded, her fingers flying across her console. "The quantum relay is active. I'm transmitting now." Aside, the Velthari patrol fleet began to move. 5 cruisers formed a circle around the tiny Earth vessel, their weapons glowing with deadly energy. Commander Zethral watched from his bridge. Feeling nothing but contempt for these soft creatures who dared to travel among the stars, "They have not surrendered," his weapons officer reported. Then destroy them, Zethral said. Let this be a lesson to any other primitives who think they can enter our space. The first blast struck the Endeavor's engine section, tearing through the hull like paper. The second hit the crew quarters. The third and fourth destroyed what remained of the ship. Scattering debris across thousands of kilometers, Lisa Grant's final transmission reached Earth 3 days later. Admiral Patricia Cole watched it in a secure room at United Earth Command headquarters. Beside her stood General Samuel Hughes of the Marine Corps and Director Nathan Price of Earth's Intelligence. They watched in silence as the Velthary ships surrounded the Endeavor. They heard Captain Porter's calm voice as he tried to negotiate. They saw the weapons fire that ended 43 lives in seconds. Lisa's voice came through the static, broken but clear. They're firing on us. Tell everyone back home. Tell them we tried to be peaceful. Tell them we did everything right. They just didn't care. Tell my mom I love her. Tell the transmission ended. Admiral Cole was 62 years old. She had served in 3 wars on Earth before humanity reached the stars. She had seen friends die in combat. She had made hard decisions that cost lives. But she had never felt anything like the cold fury that filled her now. Find out everything about these Velthary, she said. Her voice was steady, but her hands were shaking. I want to know their fleet strength, their territory, their weaknesses. I want to know what they eat, how they breathe, and what makes them die. General Hughes nodded. And then, Admiral Cole turned to face him. Her eyes were dry, but something dangerous burned behind them. And then we're going to teach them what happens when you murder our people. Director Price cleared his throat. Admiral, with respect, we've seen their technology. It's far beyond ours. Their ships are larger, faster, more powerful. If we go to war with them, ... then we'll lose? Admiral Cole shook her head. Maybe, probably, but we'll make them remember the cost. She looked back at the frozen image on the screen, the last frame of Lisa Grant's transmission. 43 people, Nathan. Scientists, explorers, people who just wanted to learn about the universe. And those monsters killed them without a second thought. She straightened her uniform and walked toward the door. Contact every government on Earth. Tell them what happened. Tell them we're going to war. The galaxy had no idea what it had just awakened. The news spread across Earth like fire through dry grass. Every screen, every broadcast, every social media platform carried the same story. A peaceful human ship had been destroyed without warning by an alien empire called the Velthary Dominion. 43 people were dead, and the aliens had laughed about it, for the first time in human history. The entire planet was united in a single emotion, rage, in New York. Millions gathered in the streets, holding pictures of the fallen crew. In Beijing, factories that had been producing consumer goods switched to military production overnight. In Moscow, old nuclear submarines were pulled from retirement and fitted with new engines. In every nation, on every continent, humanity prepared for war. Admiral Patricia Cole stood before the United Nations Security Council, explaining the situation in simple terms. The Velthary Dominion controls 900 worlds. They have been conquering other species for 12,000 years. Their fleet is larger than anything we can imagine, and they have made it very clear that they consider us beneath their notice. The Russian representative leaned forward. Then how can we possibly fight them? Admiral Cole smiled, but there was no warmth in it, because they've never fought anyone like us. She pressed a button, and images appeared on the screens around the room. Throughout our history, humans have been at war with each other. We've developed weapons that can destroy cities, plagues that can wipe out nations, strategies that turn weaknesses into strengths. We've fought on land, at sea, in the air, and in space. We've spent 10,000 years learning how to kill each other. She paused, letting that sink in. The Velthary have conquered species that surrender when threatened. They've never faced an enemy that would rather die than submit. They've never faced us. Council voted unanimously for war. Meanwhile, on the station world of Nexus Prime, the Galactic Assembly gathered for its monthly session. Representatives from 412 spacefaring civilizations filled the massive chamber. Each species occupying its designated area, The Velthari delegation sat in seats of honor near the front, their scaled bodies draped in ceremonial robes. When the human delegation entered, barely anyone noticed. Humanity was new to the galactic stage, having achieved faster-than-light travel only 50 years ago. They controlled a single solar system. They were nobody. Ambassador Christopher Blake was a tall man with gray hair and calm eyes. He had spent 30 years as a diplomat, negotiating peace treaties and trade agreements. He had never expected to declare war on an alien empire, but life was full of surprises. "Honored members of the Assembly," he began, his voice steady, "I come before you to report a crime. 6 weeks ago, the Earth research vessel Endeavour was destroyed by Velthari warships. 43 humans were killed. They were scientists, not soldiers. They carried no weapons. They posed no threat to anyone." High Speaker Tethvern, the leader of the Velthari delegation, rose to respond. He was massive, even for his species, with scales that shimmered like polished gold. The human vessel entered space that borders our territory. When commanded to surrender, they hesitated. In Velthari law, hesitation is resistance. Resistance is punishable by death. A murmur of agreement rippled through the assembly. Many species had learned the hard way that it was better to obey the Velthari than to question them. Ambassador Blake nodded slowly. "I see, and if we refuse to accept this judgment..." Tethvern's mouth stretched into what might have been a smile. "Then you may file a formal complaint with the Assembly's Justice Committee. They will review your case within the next decade or so." "I have a different idea," Ambassador Blake said. "Humanity formally requests recognition as a belligerent power against the Velthari Dominion. We are declaring war." The chamber fell silent. Every eye turned to the small human delegation. Then Tethvern began to laugh, a deep rumbling sound that echoed through the hall. Other delegates joined in, their various voices creating a chorus of mockery. "You wish to fight us?" Tethvern said when he finally stopped laughing. "One world against 900? Your entire fleet would not survive 5 minutes against a single Velthari battle group. This is not war. This is suicide." Ambassador Blake remained calm. "Perhaps. But we have a saying on Earth. It's not the size of the dog in the fight. It's the size of the fight in the dog." He paused. "You have no idea how much fight we have." He turned and walked out of the chamber, his delegation following behind him. The assembled species watched them go, most still chuckling at the absurdity of it all. They would not be laughing for long. Back on Earth, the preparations continued at a pace that would have seemed impossible to any other species. Humans, it turned out, were very good at building things quickly when properly motivated. The shipyards of Luna worked around the clock, their forges burning bright against the darkness of space. Workers slept in shifts, eating their meals at their stations, pushing themselves to the breaking point and beyond. Ships that would normally take years to build were completed in months. General Samuel Hughes oversaw the military planning from a bunker deep beneath the Rocky Mountains. His staff worked on strategies that had never been attempted before, taking lessons from every war in human history and adapting them for space combat. "The Velthari expects us to fight like everyone else they've conquered," Hughes told his officers. "They expect us to meet them, ship to ship, gun to gun. They expect us to be predictable." He smiled grimly. "We're going to be anything but." Director Nathan Price's intelligence networks reached out across the galaxy, making contact with species that had suffered under Velthari rule. There were many of them. The Kreth, whose homeworld had been strip-mined for resources. The Venari, whose population had been enslaved for centuries. The Asani, whose culture had been nearly destroyed. All of them hated the Velthari. None of them had ever dared to resist until now. "We can't promise you victory," Director Price told their secret representatives. "But we can promise you a fight. And sometimes, that's enough to change everything." Admiral Cole supervised the development of new weapons, technologies that human scientists had only dreamed about before. Kinetic impactors that could strike with the force of nuclear bombs. Stealth systems that could hide a ship from the most advanced sensors. Drones that could think and fight on their own. She also oversaw the training of a new generation of warriors. Young men and women who had grown up watching videos of the Endeavor's destruction. Who had memorized the names of the 43 fallen crew members. who burned with a desire for justice that bordered on obsession. "Remember why we're fighting," she told them during one training session. "Not for conquest. Not for glory. We're fighting because they killed our people, and they need to learn that it has consequences." One young pilot, a woman named Nicole Peters, raised her hand. "Admiral, what if we lose? What if they destroy Earth like they destroyed the Endeavor?" Admiral Cole looked at her for a long moment. "Then we make sure they pay such a high price that no one else ever has to face what we faced. We make them remember us forever." 6 months after the destruction of the Endeavor, the human fleet was ready. 312 ships, each one crewed by volunteers who knew they might never come home. They gathered in formation around Earth, their hulls gleaming in the sunlight. Admiral Cole stood on the bridge of her flagship, the carrier Retribution. Around her, the crew moved with quiet efficiency, checking systems and preparing for departure. "All ships report ready, Admiral," her communications officer reported. Cole nodded. "Then let's go remind the galaxy why they should never have messed with humanity." The fleet jumped to hyperspace, leaving Earth behind. They were heading for Velthri territory. The war had begun. The planet Kethver was a jewel of the Velthri Dominion. It sat on the edge of their territory, serving as a fortress world that guarded the border against any species foolish enough to challenge Velthri supremacy. Its surface bristled with military installations, and a fleet of 200 warships orbited above it, ready to crush any threat. Governor Vethanol had ruled Kethver for 300 years. He was old, even by Velthri standards, and he had seen many species try to challenge the Dominion. None had succeeded. None had even come close. When his sensor operators reported a single human vessel approaching the system, he felt nothing but contempt. "One ship?" he said, his scales shifting with amusement. "The humans send one ship against us. They are even more foolish than I thought." The human vessel was broadcasting a message of peace, claiming to carry a diplomatic delegation that wished to negotiate. Vethanol had no interest in negotiations. The Dominion did not negotiate with lesser species. They conquered them. "Destroy it," he ordered, "and make sure to record the destruction. I want to send the footage back to their pathetic little planet." 20 Velthari warships broke formation and moved to intercept the human vessel. Their weapons powered up, targeting systems locking onto the small, slow-moving target. The human ship made no attempt to run or fight. It simply continued on its course, broadcasting its message of peace. The first Velthari ship opened fire. The human vessel exploded in a brilliant flash of light. Governor Vethanol was about to order his fleet to stand down when something strange happened. His sensor operators began shouting in alarm. New contacts were appearing throughout the system, not from outside, but from within. Ships were emerging from the asteroid belt, rising up from behind moons, decloaking in positions that should have been impossible to reach undetected. 32 vessels, the sensor officer reported, his voice shaking. Human signatures. They're painted black and running minimal power. Our sensors never detected them. Commander Nicole Peters sat in the captain's chair of her ship, watching the Velthari scramble to respond. She had spent 3 weeks hidden in this system, her small strike force drifting silently through the asteroid belt while they waited for the signal. The decoy ship had served its purpose perfectly. Every Velthari eye had been focused on it, while the real threat moved into position. "All ships, this is Commander Peters," she said into her communicator. "Execute attack pattern Delta. Primary targets are ground installations. Avoid civilian areas. We're here to hurt them, not to become them." The human ships were not traditional warships. They were converted cargo haulers, mining vessels, and survey ships. They carried no energy weapons, no missiles, no torpedoes. Instead, they carried kinetic impactors, simple metal slugs that could be accelerated to incredible speeds. The concept was ancient, dating back to humanity's earliest space programs. Take a dense piece of metal, accelerate it to a significant fraction of the speed of light. Let physics do the rest. No explosives needed. No complex technology. Just mass and velocity. The two most fundamental forces in the universe. The first impactor struck Kethfer's primary military command center at 3% of light speed. The impact released energy equivalent to a small nuclear weapon. The building, and everything within 5 kilometers of it, simply ceased to exist. Before the Velthari could respond, 16 more impactors struck. Shipyards, weapons factories, fuel depots, communication arrays. Each one was selected for maximum military impact with minimum civilian casualties. The humans had spent months studying this world, identifying every strategic target, planning every strike. "We've lost contact with the Southern Continent military hub," an officer reported, his voice trembling. "The Western shipyards are gone. Orbital defense batteries are not responding." Governor Vethanal stared at his tactical display, watching his world's defenses crumble. This was impossible. The humans were primitives. They didn't have the technology for this kind of attack. They didn't have the intelligence to plan it. They didn't have the courage to execute it, but they did, and they were winning. "Launch the fleet," he ordered. "Find those ships and destroy them." The Velthari warships scrambled to respond, but they had a problem. Human ships were small, fast, and nearly invisible against the blackness of space. Every time a Velthari vessel thought it had a target lock, the human ship would change course or go dark. Disappearing from sensors entirely, Commander Peters watched a Velthari cruiser pass within 1,000 kilometers of her position, its weapons searching for targets that seemed to vanish like ghosts. She held her breath, trusting in the stealth coating that covered her hull, the low-power systems that made her ship nearly invisible, and the training that kept her crew silent and still. The cruiser passed by without detecting them. "Launch second wave," Peters ordered. "Target their orbital shipyards. I want every ship they're building turned into scrap." More impactors flew, striking the massive construction facilities that orbited Kethfer. Half-finished warships exploded. Docking bays shattered. Fuel reserves ignited in spectacular fireballs that could be seen from the planet's surface. Lieutenant Ryan Scott monitored the tactical situation from his station. "Commander Velthari fleet is returning to protect the planet. They're abandoning the search." "Good," Peters replied. "That means it's time to leave." The human ships began to withdraw, slipping back into the darkness of deep space. They moved slowly, carefully, avoiding any detection as they made their way toward the prearranged jump points. The Velthari fleet returned too late to catch them. As her ship jumped to hyperspace, Commander Peters ordered one final message broadcast on all frequencies: 43 lives. Remember that number? The news of Kethver spread through the Dominion like a disease. A primitive species had struck a Velthari fortress world and escaped without losses. They had destroyed military installations that had stood for thousands of years. They had humiliated the greatest power in the galaxy. High Commander Zethral received the news while dining with other senior officers. He threw his food against the wall in rage, his scales turning dark with fury. This was his fault. He had destroyed the human ship that started this war. He had underestimated them. The Supreme Council of the Dominion summoned him to their chambers. They were ancient beings, the oldest and most powerful of their kind, and they did not tolerate failure. "You began this war," the eldest council member said. "You will end it. Take a fleet to their homeworld. Destroy everything. Leave nothing alive." Zethral bowed low. "How many ships?" 2,000. Enough to crush any resistance they might offer. Enough to make an example that the galaxy will never forget. Zethral assembled the largest fleet in Dominion history. 2,000 warships, crewed by the best warriors his species had to offer. They gathered at a staging point near the edge of human territory, preparing for the final assault. On Earth, Admiral Cole received intelligence reports of the gathering fleet. She studied the numbers, calculated the odds, and smiled. "They're coming with everything they have," General Hughes said. 2,000 ships against our 300? Those are not good odds." "No," Admiral Cole agreed. "They're not good odds for them." Hughes looked at her like she had lost her mind. "Admiral, they're bringing their fleet to us," Cole explained. "To our territory. To space, we've had months to prepare." She stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the stars. The Velthari are used to fighting on their terms. They choose the battlefield. They control the engagement. They always have the advantage. She turned back to face him. This time, we choose the battlefield. And I promise you, General, we've prepared quite a welcome for them. The human fleet began moving into defensive positions. Mines were deployed. Traps were set. Every asteroid, every moon, every piece of space debris became a potential weapon. Earth's solar system was transformed into a killing field, and humanity waited for the enemy to arrive. Hi, Commander Zethral stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Dominion's Wrath, as his fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the human solar system. 2,000 warships stretched out behind him, the largest armada the Velthari had ever assembled. Enough firepower to destroy a dozen worlds. Enough warriors to conquer an empire. And yet as he looked at the tactical display, something felt wrong. The system was quiet. Too quiet. He had expected some kind of defense, even from primitives like the humans. Orbital platforms, perhaps? A fleet gathered to meet them. Warning broadcasts demanding their withdrawal. Instead, there was nothing. Just empty space and distant stars. Scan for enemy vessels, Zethral ordered. No contacts, High Commander, his sensor officer replied. The system appears to be undefended. Zethral's scales shifted uneasily. The humans had shown themselves to be clever at Kethfer. They had used deception and surprise to achieve what should have been impossible. He would not underestimate them again. Advance slowly, he commanded. Full sensor sweeps. Report anything unusual. The fleet began to move inward, toward the third planet where the humans made their home. Each ship maintained perfect formation, weapons ready, shields at maximum. They traveled at half speed, taking no chances. For 2 hours, nothing happened. The fleet passed the outer planets without incident. They detected human satellites and deep space stations, but these were abandoned, their crews evacuated to safety. Zethral began to wonder if the humans had simply fled, leaving their world to be destroyed. Then they reached the asteroid belt. The first mine detonated against the hull of a destroyer, punching a hole through its armor and venting atmosphere into space. A second later, a dozen more mines activated throughout the fleet, their simple proximity sensors triggering as Velthari ships passed too close. Evasive action, Zethral shouted. All ships, defensive formation. Many of us will not survive today, but what we do here will be remembered forever. Not just by humanity, but by every species in this galaxy. Today, we prove that courage matters more than numbers. That determination matters more than technology. That humans do not surrender. She took a deep breath. All ships, engage. The battle for Earth had begun. Jake Morrison launched from the Retribution's hangar bay, his fighter screaming into the void. Around him, 200 pilots did the same, forming attack wings that swept toward the Velthari fleet. Their orders were simple. Disable the big ships. Disrupt their formations. Create openings for the capital ships to exploit. Stay with me, Carlos, Jake said, as he angled toward a Velthari cruiser. We're going for their sensor array. Right behind you, Jake. Cruiser's defensive guns opened fire, filling space with deadly energy. Jake twisted and rolled, using every trick he had learned in training and a few he invented on the spot. A blast grazed his wing, but he kept going, his thumb hovering over the firing button. At the last possible moment, he squeezed the trigger. His missiles struck the cruiser's censored dome, blinding the massive ship. Carlos followed with a second volley that took out the communications array. The cruiser was still dangerous, but now it was deaf and blind. Good hit, Jake shouted. Moving to next target. Across the battlefield, similar scenes played out. Human ships darted between Velthari formations, striking vulnerable points and withdrawing before the enemy could respond. The Velthari had superior firepower, but the humans had speed, agility, and tactics that their enemy had never seen before. Lieutenant Maria Santos commanded a torpedo boat, barely larger than a fighter. Her ship carried 4 heavy torpedoes, each one capable of crippling a capital ship. She had already used 2 of them, sinking a Velthari cruiser that had been threatening the carrier group. 2 targets remaining, her weapons officer reported. Enemy battlecruiser at bearing 270. Maria looked at the tactical display. The battlecruiser was huge, one of the largest ships in the Velthari fleet. It was also directly threatening the Retribution. If she didn't stop it, Admiral Cole's flagship would be destroyed. "Set intercept course," she ordered. "We're going in." Her ship accelerated toward the battlecruiser, weaving through the crossfire that filled space around them. Enemy fighters tried to intercept, but Maria's pilot was the best in the fleet, dodging every attack while maintaining their approach vector at 500 kilometers. She fired both remaining torpedoes. They streaked toward the battlecruiser, their guidance systems locking onto the ship's reactor signature. The Velthari tried to shoot them down, but they were too fast, too agile. The first torpedo struck the battlecruiser's engine section. The second hit the reactor. The ship exploded in a fireball that could be seen from Earth's surface. Maria's ship was caught in the blast wave, her hull buckling under the pressure. Alarms screamed as systems failed across the board.
"Damage report,"
she shouted. "Hull breach on deck 3! Engines at 50%. We're alive, but barely." Maria smiled grimly. "Then we keep fighting." The battle raged for 19 hours. Ships were destroyed on both sides. Heroes emerged and fell. Tactics that had never been tried before were invented and executed in the heat of combat. And slowly, impossibly, the tide began to turn. High Commander Zethrael watched his fleet die around him. He could not understand it. His ships were larger, more powerful, crewed by warriors who had conquered 100 worlds. But these humans, these soft, primitive creatures, fought like nothing he had ever seen. They did not retreat when damaged. They did not surrender when outnumbered. They threw themselves into battle with a ferocity that bordered on madness, accepting death if it meant taking an enemy with them. When the Dominion's wrath took a direct hit to its bridge, Zethrael finally understood the truth. Humans were not prey. They were predators. And he had made the fatal mistake of threatening their home. His last thought, before the ship exploded, was of the human vessel he had destroyed all those months ago. 43 scientists would simply wanted to explore the stars. This was their revenge. Of the 2,000 ships that had entered Earth's solar system, fewer than 200 escaped to tell the tale. The rest were scattered across space as debris and frozen corpses. Admiral Cole watched the survivors flee, her own ship barely holding together. Around her, the remnants of humanity's fleet drifted among the wreckage, too exhausted to celebrate. They had won. Against impossible odds, against an enemy that should have crushed them, they had won. But the war was not over yet. The news of the Battle of Souls spread across the galaxy faster than any ship could travel. Every species, every world, every civilization heard the same impossible story. A primitive race from an unremarkable planet had destroyed the mightiest fleet the Velthari Dominion had ever assembled. 2,000 warships had entered human space. Fewer than 200 had returned. In the halls of the Galactic Assembly on Nexus Prime, representatives whispered to each other in disbelief. The Velthari had ruled the Orion Arm for 12,000 years. They had crushed every challenger, conquered every rival, dominated every species they encountered. And now, in a single battle, species that had achieved faster-than-light travel barely 50 years ago had broken their power. The Velthari delegation's seats remained empty. High Speaker Tethfern, who had laughed at humanity's declaration of war, had been recalled to the homeworld in disgrace. The Supreme Council that had ordered the attack on Earth was facing rebellion from their own people. Their empire, built on fear and force, was beginning to crumble. 6 months after the battle, the Galactic Assembly convened a special session. The chamber was packed with representatives from across known space, all of them eager to see what the humans would do next. Would they seek revenge? Would they try to conquer the Velthari, as the Velthari had conquered so many others? Ambassador Christopher Blake entered the chamber at the head of a human delegation that included Admiral Patricia Cole, General Samuel Hughes, and Commander Nicole Peters. They walked with the quiet confidence of people who had faced death and emerged victorious. The assembly fell silent as they took their places. Blake stood before the gathered representatives and began to speak. His voice was calm, measured, carrying easily through the vast chamber. 6 months ago, I stood in this room and declared war on the Velthari Dominion. Many of you laughed. You thought we were foolish, primitive, suicidal. You expected to hear of our extinction within weeks? He paused, letting his gaze sweep across the chamber. You were wrong. He pressed a control, and images appeared on screens throughout the room. The wreckage of the Velthari fleet, the ruins of their military installations on Kethfer, the celebrations on Earth as news of the victory spread. We did not seek this war. The Endeavor was a research vessel, crewed by scientists who wanted nothing more than to study the stars. They carried no weapons. They posed no threat. And the Velthari destroyed them without warning, without mercy, without a second thought.
Ow.
Blake's voice hardened. 43 people died that day. 43 humans who represented the best of our species. Their deaths demanded a response, and we provided one. Admiral Cole stepped forward, her uniform still bearing the marks of combat. The Velthari sent 2,000 ships to destroy our world. We sent their ashes home in a cargo container. She smiled, and it was not a friendly expression. Let that be a lesson to anyone else who thinks humanity is an easy target. The chamber stirred uncomfortably. Many of the species present had never heard such words spoken by anyone, let alone by a race so young and seemingly weak. It was unsettling. It was impressive. It was terrifying, Ambassador Blake continued. But we did not come here to threaten you. We came here to offer a choice. He turned to address the entire assembly directly. For 12,000 years, the Velthari have ruled through fear. They conquered because they could. They killed because no one could stop them. That era is over. He gestured to the Velthari seats still empty. Their empire is collapsing. World after world is declaring independence. The species they enslaved are rising up. The coalition they built through terror is falling apart. He paused, and humanity is not going to fill that void. Murmurs of surprise rippled through the chamber. This was not what they had expected. Victorious species usually sought to expand their power, to take what they could while they had the advantage. We have no interest in conquest, Blake said. We have no desire to rule over other species. What we want is simple: peace, trade, and mutual respect. We want to explore the galaxy, to learn from its peoples, to share what we know. We want to be partners, not masters. He turned to face a section of the chamber where several species sat together, species that had been oppressed by the Velthari for generations. The Kreth, the Venari, the Asani, and dozens of others. To those who suffered under Velthari rule, we offer friendship. We helped you win your freedom. Now we ask nothing in return except the chance to know you better. Visit our world. Trade with our merchants. Learn from our teachers. We have much to offer each other. The Kreth ambassador, a being of crystalline structure who had secretly provided intelligence to humanity during the war, rose to speak. The humans kept their word to us. They promised to fight, and they fought. They promised to free us, and they did. If they offer friendship, I believe they mean it. One by one, other species added their voices. The Venari, whose slaves had been freed when the Velthari economy collapsed. The Asani, whose culture was being rebuilt after centuries of suppression. Even species that had been neutral in the conflict expressed interest in closer ties with humanity. But not everyone was convinced. The ambassador from the Tethkai Combine, a powerful trading consortium that had profited from Velthari dominance, stood to ask a question. You say you want peace, he said, his voice dripping with skepticism. But your fleet proved that you are capable of incredible violence. How do we know you will not turn that violence against us? Admiral Cole answered before Blake could respond. Because we're not the Velthari. We don't attack without reason. We don't conquer for profit. We don't enslave other species. She met the ambassador's eyes without flinching. But let me be absolutely clear. If you threaten our people, if you attack our worlds, if you mistake our desire for peace as weakness, you will discover exactly how violent we can be. Let that sink in. We've spent our entire existence fighting each other. Every weapon you can imagine we've invented. Every tactic, every strategy, every form of warfare, we've mastered. The Velthari thought they were the most dangerous species in the galaxy. They were wrong. We are. The chamber fell silent. No one doubted her words. Ambassador Blake stepped forward again, softening the tension. What Admiral Cole is saying is that we prefer peace, but we are prepared for war. We would rather trade than fight. We would rather learn than conquer. But we will never again allow our people to be slaughtered without consequence. He spread his hands in a gesture of openness. The choice is yours. Work with us, and we will be the best friends you have ever had. Work against us, and, well, he glanced at the empty Velthari seats. I think you know how that ends. The Assembly voted overwhelmingly to establish formal relations with humanity. Trade agreements were drafted. Diplomatic exchanges were arranged. For the first time in galactic history, a species had risen to power not through conquest, but through proving they were too dangerous to conquer. In the years that followed, humanity expanded across the stars. They built colonies on worlds that had never known human footsteps. They established trade routes that connected dozens of species. They formed alliances with races that had been enemies for millennia, bringing peace to conflicts that had raged for generations. The human embassy on Nexus Prime became one of the most important buildings in the galaxy. Representatives from hundreds of species passed through its doors, seeking trade deals, military advice, or simply the chance to understand these strange, dangerous, wonderful creatures from Earth. A memorial wall stood in the embassy's main hall, inscribed with 43 names. Captain Daniel Porter, Communications Officer Lisa Grant, Chief Science Officer Kevin Walsh, Navigator Amy Torres, and 39 others who had died aboard the Endeavor, sparking a war that changed the galaxy forever. Every human who passed through the embassy stopped at that wall. They read the names. They remembered the lives that had been lost, and they renewed their commitment to making sure those deaths meant something. Commander Nicole Peters, now an admiral herself, visited the memorial during a diplomatic mission 10 years after the war. She had commanded the strike on Kethver. She had led fighters in the Battle of Sol. She had done things that would haunt her dreams for the rest of her life. But standing before that wall, she felt only pride. Pride in her species. Pride in what they had accomplished. Pride in the galaxy they were helping to build. A young Velthari approached her. One of a new generation that had grown up after the fall of the Dominion. His scales were pale, his eyes uncertain. Admiral Peters, he said hesitantly. I wanted to thank you. Nicole raised an eyebrow. Thank me. My people destroyed your empire. The young Velthari shook his head. You freed us from our own rulers. The Supreme Council, the High Commanders, they were tyrants. They led our species into a war we could not win because their pride would not let them back down. When they fell, we had a chance to become something better. He looked at the memorial wall. I am sorry for what my people did to your endeavor. I am sorry for the 43 who died. But I hope that their sacrifice, and the sacrifice of everyone who fought in the war, leads to a future where our species can be friends. Nicole studied him for a long moment. Then she smiled, genuinely smiled, for the first time in years. I hope so too, she said. I really do. Outside the embassy, the stars continued to shine, as they had for billions of years. The galaxy remained vast and mysterious and full of wonders yet to be discovered, and somewhere out there, among all those countless worlds, humanity was finding its place. Not as conquerors, not as victims, but as a species that had looked into the darkness, fought back with everything they had, and emerged stronger than before. The 43 would never be forgotten, and neither would the lesson they had taught. The galaxy never declare war on humanity. They finish what they start.